That locket, is the old woman screeched, right there in the damn restaurant, like a banshee. Thing is, everyone always does what Elelenina Vance wants. Always. Except this one waitress. But Mia had no freaking clue what that tarnished piece of silver meant to the Ice Queen, or that it was the only thing standing between Mia's sick mother and the street. Julian, Vance's son? He just saw a mess to clean up. Money always works, right? Wrong. What they don't know? That locket isn't just metal. It's a map. A map to a secret Elelenina buried 50 years ago. A secret that's about to turn their whole damn world upside down. They have no idea how Mia's quiet kindness will change everything. That locket, the old woman screeched, right there in the damn restaurant, like a banshee. Thing is, everyone always does what Elelenina Vance wants. Always. Except this one waitress. But Mia had no freaking clue what that tarnished piece of silver meant to the Ice Queen, or that it was the only thing standing between Mia's sick mother and the street. Julian, Vance's son? He just saw a mess to clean up. Money always works, right? Wrong. What they don't know. That locket isn't just metal, it's a map. A map to a secret Elelenina buried 50 years ago. A secret that's about to turn their whole damn world upside down. They have no idea how Mia's quiet kindness will change everything. Elelenina Vance, she was a force, a titan whose empire stretched across continents. Skyscrapers kissed the sky at her command, and fortunes rose and fell on her whim. She controlled it all, or so she thought. Until she saw it, a silver starburst, dangling innocently from a waitress's neck in the sterile atmosphere of Aria, San Francisco's most exclusive dining establishment. The sight of that simple locket cracked her carefully constructed facade, unleashing a torrent of memories she'd fought for half a century to suppress. 82 years hadn't dulled Elelenina's sharp mind, nor her regal bearing. Her silver hair, an expertly crafted chignon, framed a face etched with the battles of a life lived at the pinnacle of power. Her stormy gray eyes missed nothing. Tonight, though, they were haunted. Aria was her usual Tuesday haunt, an evening devoid of sentimental anniversaries or birthdays. Tuesdays were simply quiet, blessedly empty of ghosts. Across the table sat Julian Vance, her son, the slick CEO of Vance Industries. Julian spoke the language of quarterly earnings and market acquisitions, his words precise, a calculated dance around the subject of their company's projected growth. He was a mirror of his father, Elelenina's late husband Richard, a man who had built an empire on innovation and ruthlessness. "Mother, are you even listening?" Julian's question sliced through the drone, a thread of impatience lacing his tone. "The Aerosphere acquisition is critical. The board expects your sign-off." Elelenina offered a perfunctory nod, her gaze sweeping the opulent room. Crystal chandeliers cast a glittering light upon tables draped in crisp linen. The delicate clinking of silverware formed a subtle, almost hypnotic symphony. The problem was, it was all too perfect, too controlled. It was a cage crafted of gold. Richard's death a decade ago had plunged her into this gilded isolation. The vibrancy had leached from her world, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. A young waitress, no more than 20, approached their table, her movements reflecting practiced efficiency, a subtle weariness in her posture. Her uniform was neat, though the cuffs showed the telltale signs of frequent washing. A simple brown ponytail was slightly askew, suggesting a hurriedness that belied the restaurant's leisurely pace. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Vance?" the waitress inquired, her voice soft but clear. Julian, already engrossed in his phone, dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Mrs. Vance," the girl gently corrected, but Elelenina wasn't looking at her face. Her gaze was riveted on the delicate silver chain peeking from beneath the waitress's collar. At the end of the chain, nested snugly between her collarbones, was a locket. Not just any locket, but a starburst, its silver tarnished with age, yet radiating an unmistakable, heartbreaking familiarity. At its center, where the rays of the star converged, was a tiny sapphire, the color of a summer sky just before dawn. Time seemed to fracture. The murmur of the restaurant receded into a distant hum. Elelenina's pulse hammered against her ribs, each beat a painful reminder of a past she had desperately tried to bury. It couldn't be. After all these years, it was impossible. Yet every line, every minute imperfection, etched into the hand-engraved rays of the star, was burned into her memory. She knew the feel of its cool metal against her skin, the way it nestled against her heart. She had designed it herself. "Mother? What is it?" "You look as if you've seen a ghost," Julian observed, finally tearing his gaze from his screen. But Elena didn't hear him. Her vision narrowed, focusing solely on the locket. A dam burst, unleashing a torrent of repressed memories. Stolen glances during a summer-long past, the pungent scent of oil paints and turpentine, the intoxicating weight of a forbidden love, and the crushing agony of a sacrifice she had been forced to make. The waitress, sensing the intensity of the older woman's gaze, shifted uncomfortably, instinctively tucking the locket further into her collar, a subconscious attempt at concealment. But it was too late. Elena had seen it. A choked sob, alien to the rarefied atmosphere of Arya, escaped her lips. Her manicured hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening with a mixture of disbelief and profound grief. Tears, hot and unstoppable, streamed down her perfectly powdered cheeks, carving paths through the meticulously crafted mask of composure she had worn for decades. "That locket," she croaked, her voice trembling, her shaky finger jabbing towards the girl's chest. "Where? Where did you get that locket?" The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, every conversation suspended mid-sentence. Julian stared, dumbfounded, at his mother's unprecedented emotional eruption. The young waitress, whose name tag identified her as Mia, looked from the weeping billionaire to the locket at her neck, her face a mixture of confusion and dawning alarm. Elena Vance, the matriarch of a financial empire, a woman who had faced down hostile takeovers and buried a husband without shedding a public tear, was now weeping with the raw, soul-deep anguish of a long-lost hope impossibly rekindled. The scene at table 7 sent ripples of consternation through Arya. Jean-Pierre, the maître d', a man who prided himself on orchestrating flawless evenings, hurried over, his face a mask of professional concern. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Vance?" he inquired, his voice a low, soothing murmur. Recovering from his initial shock, Julian seized control. "My mother is simply feeling a bit unwell. A momentary episode. We'll be fine." He shot a sharp, dismissive glance at the waitress. "Mia, you can go." But Elena's hand shot out, her grip surprisingly strong as she latched onto Mia's arm. "No, don't go, please," she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. "That locket, I must know about it." Mia stood frozen, caught in the headlights of Elena's desperate gaze. The attention of the entire room weighed upon her, a suffocating blanket of scrutiny. She was acutely aware of her worn shoes, the pen stain on her apron, the unbridgeable gulf between her world and that of the woman clutching her arm. It was my mother's," Mia stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "She gave it to me." "Your mother?" Elena's eyes searched Mia's face, desperately seeking a resemblance, a clue, anything to confirm her impossible hope. "What is her name? Where is she?" Julian intervened, his tone firm. "Mother, this is hardly the time or place. You're causing a scene." He gently pried his mother's fingers from Mia's arm and turned to the young woman. "My apologies. My mother is tired. She mistook your necklace for something else." He pulled out a thick black card holder, extracted several crisp $100 bills, and tried to press them into Mia's hand. Mia flinched back as if the money were contaminated. "No, thank you, sir. It's all right." Her eyes darted back to Elena, who was now weeping silently, her shoulders shaking with repressed emotion. There was a raw, undeniable pain in the older woman's eyes that transcended their vastly different stations in life. It was the pain of a human heart breaking. "Please," Elena repeated, her voice regaining a sliver of its customary command, albeit frayed with emotion. "I will pay you for it. Name your price. 10,000? 20,000? Mia's eyes widened. $20,000 was more than she made in a year. It was enough to cover her mother's mounting medical bills, to fix the leaky roof in their tiny apartment, to finally breathe. A wave of dizzying temptation washed over her, threatening to overwhelm her senses. She could solve so many problems. She instinctively clutched the locket. It was cool against her warm skin, a familiar weight she had known her entire life. It was the only tangible link to her mother, Sarah, who was slowly losing her battle with early-onset Alzheimer's. "That's your story," her mother would sometimes whisper during moments of lucidity, her voice thin and frail, as she touched the locket. "It's all in there. It'll keep you safe." Mia didn't know what story it held. Her mother's past was a fragmented collection of half-remembered tales, shrouded in mystery. She didn't know who her father was or where her mother had come from before arriving in San Francisco with a baby in a single suitcase. The locket was her only anchor to that unknown history, to her own identity. To sell it would be like selling a piece of her soul. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," Mia said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I can't sell it. It's not for sale." Julian scoffed, disbelief etched on his face. "Don't be ridiculous. It's a piece of silver. I'll write you a check for $50,000 right now. You can quit this job tonight." The offer hung in the air, glittering, seductive, impossible to ignore. $50,000, a fortune. But as Mia looked at Elena, she saw not a billionaire accustomed to getting her way, but a woman consumed by an unquenchable desire to reclaim a piece of her past. And Mia, who had so little of her own past to cling to, understood that perfectly. "No," she said, her voice stronger this time. "My answer is no. I'm very sorry for your distress." She gave a slight, formal bow. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my work." With that, she turned and walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the stares of every patron boring into her back, heard the whispers trailing in her wake. She fled to the relative sanctuary of the kitchen, her hands shaking so violently that she had to grip the edge of a stainless steel counter to steady herself. Back at the table, Julian was livid. The audacity! A $50,000 offer for some cheap bauble, and she refuses? "She's playing you, Mother. She'll come back tomorrow with a lawyer, demanding $1 million. But Elena wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the kitchen door through which Mia had disappeared. The girl's refusal hadn't angered her. It had intrigued her. It confirmed her growing suspicion. The locket's value wasn't monetary. The girl cherished it, just as she was meant to. "Get me her name, Julian," Elena commanded, her voice low and resolute. The tears had ceased, replaced by a steely determination. "Her full name, her address, everything you can find out about her." "What are you going to do?" Julian asked, bewildered. Elena dabbed her eyes with a linen napkin, her composure slowly returning, armor being reassembled piece by piece. "If she won't sell a memory," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "then I shall have to buy her story." The next morning, the sterile quiet of Elena Vance's penthouse apartment was broken by the arrival of David Harrison. Harrison was a private investigator, a man whose unremarkable appearance belied a formidable talent for unearthing secrets. Discreet, efficient, and expensive, he was the best in the business. The emotional storm of the previous night had subsided, leaving behind a disturbing calm and a singular obsessive focus. Julian watched. "I want to know everything about her," Elena stated, her voice devoid of its earlier fragility. "Amelia Russo. She works at Aria. Find out where she lives, who her family is, what her circumstances are. Be thorough, but be invisible. I don't want her to know she's being watched." "Understood, Mrs. Vance," Harrison said, making notes in a small leather-bound book. Julian watched his mother obsess, like a cat over some injured mouse. She would break, he was sure of it. He had to intervene. "Her family," he said, and then to himself he breathed, "He made it for the girl with eyes like the sea. He made it for the girl with eyes like the sea." She whispered. The words disconnected a fragment of a memory, a star to guide her home before they sent her away. Mia frowned, confused. "What, Mom? Who sent who away?" But the moment of clarity was gone. Sarah's eyes glazed over. She smiled vaguely and began to hum a tune that had no melody. Mia's heart ached. The cryptic words were just another piece of the puzzle of her mother's past, a puzzle that was becoming more complex and dangerous by the day. She held the locket tightly. It was no longer just a keepsake. It was the center of a storm, and she was trapped within it. Julian's aggressive tactics had the opposite of their intended effect. When Elena learned from a distraught Jean-Pierre that Mia had been dismissed from her job at Aria, at Julian's insistence she was incandescent with fury, she summoned Julia to her penthouse. For the first time in years, he saw not a frail, aging mother, but the formidable woman who had stood beside his father as he built an empire. "How dare you?" she demanded, her voice dangerously low. "How dare you use the power and wealth of this family to bully a young woman who has done nothing but work for an honest living? You threatened her. You had her fired." "I was protecting you," Julian retorted, standing his ground. "You were becoming obsessed, emotional. She's a nobody, a grifter looking for a payday. I solved the problem." "You are the problem, Julian." Eleanor said, her disappointment a palpable force in the room. "You see the world as a series of transactions. You see people as assets or liabilities. You have your father's business sense, but you have none of his heart. Leave. I will handle this myself. From now on, you will stay away from Amelia Russo." After Julian departed, his face a thunderous mask of indignation, Elena felt a profound sense of isolation. Her own son was a stranger to her, a man molded by the very wealth she now found so meaningless. She called David Harrison. "I want to change the focus of the investigation," she said, her voice firm. "I don't care about Amelia Russo's finances anymore. I want to know about her mother, Sarah Russo. Find her birth certificate. I want to know where and when she was born. Dig into the adoption records for that area for that year. Cross-reference everything. Spare no expense." It was a long shot, a wild, desperate gamble based on nothing more than a gut feeling and a 50-year-old piece of jewelry. While Harrison's team began the painstaking work of sifting through decades of sealed and archived records, Elena retreated into her own past. She unlocked a safe hidden behind a painting in her study and removed a small leather-bound box. Inside were a few relics she had kept from her time with Thomas Reed. There were a handful of letters written in his elegant looping script, filled with passionate declarations of love and dreams of a future together. There was a charcoal sketch he had done of her, capturing a light in her eyes that Richard had never seen. And at the bottom of the box was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a single earring, a silver starburst with a tiny sapphire at its center. It was the matching piece to the locket. Thomas had only had enough silver for 1.5 pairs. He'd given her the locket and one earring, keeping the other for himself as a promise to find her and their child, a promise he was never able to keep. She clutched the earring, the sharp points digging into her palm. The memories were so vivid, so painful. The sterile white room of the clinic, the condescending pity in the nurse's eyes, the crushing weight of her parents' decision presented as an inescapable reality. "It's for the best, Elena. The child will have a good life with a proper family. You will forget. You will move on." But she had never forgotten, not for a single day. The ghost of her daughter Lily had haunted the periphery of her life, a constant, silent presence. Days turned into a week. Elena barely ate her mind, consumed by the past and the desperate hope for the future. Then the call came. Mrs. Vance, David Harrison's voice was different. The professional detachment was gone, replaced by something that sounded like awe. "We found it. It took leveraging every contact I have and a court order from a very friendly judge, but we unsealed the records." Elena held her breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. Sarah Russo was born on October 12, 1973, at St. Jude's Mercy Home for Unwed Mothers in Monterey County. Harrison said she was placed for adoption a day later. Her birth author is listed on the original sealed certificate. He paused. The name on the certificate is Elena Margaret Chadwick. Chadwick. It was her maiden name. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from Elena's lungs. It was true. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a delusion. It was real. Sarah Russo was her Lily. The waitress, the quiet, resilient young woman named Amelia, was her granddaughter. "Mrs. Vance, are you still there?" Harrison's voice was full of concern. Yes, Elena whispered, tears blurring the panoramic view from her window into a smear of blue and gold. Yes, I'm here. A lifetime of grief and longing crested within her, not as a wave of sorrow, but as a tidal wave of impossible, earth-shattering joy. She had found her. After 50 years of searching, a waitress in a restaurant had unknowingly brought her daughter back to her. There's more, Harrison said gently. I looked into Sarah's adoptive parents. They were a kind, working-class couple. They passed away when Sarah was a teenager. She had a difficult life, and there's no record of Amelia's father. The birth certificate lists him as unknown. It explains so much why Sarah was alone, why they were struggling. Her daughter had lived a life of hardship, a world away from the gilded cage Elena inhabited. And now she was sick, her memory fading. Her fierce protective instinct, the maternal love she had been forced to suppress for 50 years, roared to life. She would not lose her daughter again, not when she had just found her. Book the best neurological specialist in the country, Mr. Harrison. Elena commanded, her voice ringing with an authority she hadn't felt in years. Dr. Alistair Finch at Johns Hopkins. Fly him to San Francisco on my private jet. Rent out an entire wing of the best hospital if you have to. And get me an address. I am going to see my granddaughter. For Mia, the world had become a landscape of fear. Julian Vance's threats echoed in her mind. Her manager at the Daily Grind had started treating her coldly, cutting her hours. She knew it was only a matter of time before she lost that job, too. The letter from the landlord about a building-wide rent increase that seemed to apply only to her felt like another turn of the screw. She was being squeezed systematically and silently by a force she couldn't fight. Her mother's condition was worsening. The moments of lucidity were fewer and farther between. Mia spent her days terrified, feeling the walls closing in. The $75,000 she had refused now seemed like a foolish, prideful mistake. What was a piece of jewelry compared to her mother's well-being? One afternoon, as she was helping her mother with her lunch, Sarah's eyes suddenly cleared. She looked at Mia with a focus that had become heartbreakingly rare. Mia, she said, her voice weak but clear. The locket. Let me see it. Surprised, Mia took it off and placed it in her mother's palm. Sarah's frail fingers traced the starburst pattern just as Eleanor's had in her memories. My mother gave this to me, Sarah whispered. Not the woman who raised me. My real mother. I never met her. They told me she was very young, and her family was very powerful. They made her give me away. Mia leaned in, her heart pounding. Her mother had never spoken of this so clearly before. What else, Mom? What did they tell you? Just that she loved me, Sarah said, a tear rolling down her cheek. She left this for me. The nurse at the home, she made sure I got it. She said my mother called me Lily. She said the locket was a star to guide me. Her voice trailed off, the effort of remembering, exhausting her. There's something inside. Did you ever look? Mia's breath hitched. She had tried to open the locket 1,000 times as a child, but it was stuck. The clasp fused shut by age. She had always assumed it was empty. It's jammed, Mom. It never opens. There's a trick, Sarah murmured, her eyelids fluttering. A little notch on the third ray. From the top. Mia's hands trembled as she took the locket. She examined it closely, her fingers searching, and there it was, a tiny, almost invisible indentation on one of the engraved rays. Using her fingernail, she pressed down hard on the spot. There was a faint click. The locket sprang open. Mia gasped. Tucked inside the two halves were two tiny, perfectly preserved secrets. On one side, protected by a sliver of glass, was a minuscule, faded photograph. It was a picture of a young woman with a radiant smile and eyes the color of the sea. The same woman from the restaurant, but decades younger. Eleanor Vance. On the other side, engraved in a delicate, swirling script, were 4 words for Lily. Find me. Mia stared, her mind, struggling to process the impossible truth. The woman from the restaurant, her name was Elena. The name on her mother's original birth certificate was Elena. The nurse had said her mother called her Lily. For Lily, find me. Her mother, Sarah, was Lily, and the billionaire Elena Vance was her grandmother. The realization crashed over her with the force of a physical blow, the obsession with the locket, the offers of money, the tears. It wasn't about an object. It was about a person. It was about her mother. Just as this earth-shattering truth was settling in, there was a soft knock on the apartment door. Mia's first instinct was fear. Was it Julian Vance's men coming to evict them? She opened the door cautiously. Standing in the drab hallway of her apartment building was Elena Vance. She was not the imperious matriarch from the restaurant. She was dressed simply in a cashmere sweater and slacks. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a nervous, hopeful vulnerability. She was alone. "Amelia," Elena said, her voice soft. "May I please come in? I need to talk to you and to your mother." Mia was speechless. She could only nod, stepping back to let the woman into her small, cluttered home. Elena's eyes scanned the room, taking in the worn furniture, the stack of medical bills on the counter, the sheer grinding reality of their poverty. Her gaze was filled with a profound, soul-crushing regret. Her eyes finally landed on Sarah, who was sitting in her chair by the window, now lost in her own world again. Elena took a hesitant step forward. Then another, Lee, she whispered the name a breath of air, a prayer she hadn't dared to speak aloud for 50 years. Mia held up the open locket. "She told me," Mia said, her voice choked with emotion. "She just told me everything." Elena looked from the locket in Mia's hand to the face of her daughter, then back to the face of her granddaughter. The resemblance was undeniable, the same determined set of the jaw, the same strength in the eyes. Tears streamed down Elena's face once more, but this time they were not tears of grief. They were tears of homecoming. "I found you," Elena breathed, her voice breaking. "Oh, my darling girl, after all this time, I finally found you." She reached out, not for the locket, but for Mia's hand, her touch gentle and warm. The gulf between the billionaire and the waitress vanished, erased by a truth that had been hidden in a silver starburst for half a century. The air in the small apartment was thick with the weight of 50 years. It was a sacred space, a bubble of time where past and present had finally converged. Elena knelt by Sarah's chair. Her manicured fingers, which had signed billion-dollar contracts, now trembled as they gently stroked the hair of the daughter she had only ever held in her memory. She whispered the name Lily, a soft, rhythmic chant, as if the sound itself could bridge the chasm of their lost decades. For a fleeting moment, Sarah's clouded eyes seemed to focus on her, and she leaned into the touch, a deep, instinctual comfort overriding the fog of her illness. Mia stood a few feet away, the open locket still warm in her hand. The world had tilted its colors, shifting into new, unrecognizable hues. She was no longer just mere Russo, the perpetually exhausted waitress swimming against a tide of debt. She was Amelia, the granddaughter of Elena Vance, the living link between a painful secret past and a future she couldn't begin to comprehend. The revelation was a dizzying mix of shock relief and a profound bone-deep sorrow for the life her mother could have had. She looked at the two women, a tableau of reunion so raw and powerful it felt like a dream, and her own tears began to fall silently. This fragile, holy moment was shattered by a sound from the hallway. Heavy, purposeful footsteps followed by a sharp, authoritative rap on the door that was less a knock and more a demand. Mia flinched, her fear of Julian Vance and his shadowy influence rushing back. Before she could move, the door was pushed open with enough force to make it bang against the wall. Julian Vance stood on the threshold, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He was flanked by two broad-shouldered men in dark, impeccably tailored suits, their presence instantly sucking the warmth from the room. They were not bodyguards. They were instruments of power, men who solved problems with quiet, unshakable efficiency. Julian's eyes swept across the scene, his gaze dripping with contempt. He noted his mother kneeling on the floor of this squalid apartment, the sick woman in the chair, and Mia, whom he saw as the architect of this whole charade. "I knew it," he spat the word, slicing through the quiet room. He strode forward, his expensive leather shoes scuffing on the worn linoleum. "I knew you were a predator. It's a masterful performance. I'll give you that. You find a lonely old woman, discover some obscure detail of her past, And then you weave this elaborate, pathetic fantasy. He stopped directly in front of Mia, towering over her. How much did it take to convince her 100 short two? What's the going rate for a fabricated family history these days? Mia shrank back, intimidated, but also ignited by a spark of defiance. You don't understand, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Oh, I understand perfectly, Julian interrupted, his voice dangerously low. I understand that my mother is vulnerable, and you are a parasite who has attached herself to this family's wealth. Well, the game is over. He turned to his mother. Mother, we are leaving now. These men will handle this transaction. They will retrieve your property and ensure Miss Russo understands the legal consequences of extortion. He nodded sharply at one of the men who took a step towards Mia, his hand outstretched for the locket. They will do no such thing. Julian? Elena's voice cut through the air like a shard of ice. She rose to her feet with a grace that defied her age, planting herself firmly between Julian's man and Mia. She was no longer the weeping, fragile woman from the restaurant or the remorseful mother on her knees. She was Elena Vance, the matriarch, and her eyes blazed with a protective fire Julian had not seen since his father's funeral. This is not a transaction, she declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority. And this, she said, gesturing to Mia, is not a parasite. This is my granddaughter, Amelia, and this woman. Her voice broke with emotion as she pointed to Sarah, is my daughter, Lily. Julian let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Daughter, granddaughter, mother, listen to yourself. You are unwell. This horror has poisoned your mind. You have never in my entire life mentioned a lost daughter, because I was made to feel ashamed. Elena's voice boomed, startling them all with its power. Because my parents, your grandparents, decided that the family name was more important than a baby girl. They cared more for appearances and their social standing than for their own child's heart. I was 17. Julian, I was a scared girl in love with a man they deemed unsuitable, and they tore my life apart. They sent me away. They took my baby and they threatened the man I loved until he disappeared forever. They told me to forget, to move on, to bury the shame, and for 50 years I have lived with that ghost. She took a step closer to her son, her gaze unwavering. You are just like them. You see a problem and you throw money or threats at it. You cannot fathom that something's value could be anything other than monetary. You look at Amelia and you see a poor waitress. I look at her and I see a young woman with more integrity and love in her heart than you have ever shown. I offered her a fortune, Julian, a life-changing sum of money that could have solved every one of her problems. And she refused. She refused because this locket, my locket, the one I placed in my daughter's blanket, meant more to her than all the money in the world. Elena's gaze was relentless. You tried to destroy her. You had her fired. You threatened her housing, used the full weight of the Vance name to crush a girl who had nothing. And still she protected her mother's only keepsake. She protected my daughter's legacy without even knowing what it was. Silence descended thick and heavy. Julian stared at his mother, the absolute conviction in her voice, shaking the very foundations of his reality. Mia, emboldened by Elena's defense, held up her hand, the locket open in her palm. The light from the window caught the tiny faded photograph of the young, smiling Elena. Julian's eyes were drawn to it, to the undeniable proof. He saw the face of his mother before she was his mother, a girl full of a light he had never known. He saw the inscription for Lily, "Find me." His carefully ordered world, a world of spreadsheets and market values, of clear wins and losses fractured. The cold logic that had been his armor for so long shattered against the irrefutable truth of this emotional, messy human story. He looked from the locket to Mia, and for the first time he didn't see a porpa. He saw a young woman with his mother's eyes. He looked at the frail, sick woman in the chair and saw not a prop in a scam, but his aunt, a member of his family who had lived a life of hardship while he had lived in unimaginable privilege. The magnitude of the family secret of the injustice hit him with the force of a physical blow. His entire identity was built on a lie of omission. The fury drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly pallor. The arrogance in his posture collapsed, leaving him looking suddenly younger and lost. He started, but no words came. What could he say? He had been monstrous. He had wielded his power with cruelty, all in the name of a truth that was utterly false. Shame of foreign and corrosive emotion burned in his gut. He couldn't bear to look at his mother's disappointed face or at the quiet dignity of the girl he had tried to break. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked stiffly out of the apartment. He brushed past his confused men, leaving them in the doorway. "Go," Elelonena commanded them, her voice quiet but firm. They glanced at each other, then retreated, closing the door softly behind them, sealing the new family within the quiet walls of the apartment. The storm had passed. In the ensuing silence, Mia finally let out a shuddering breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Eleanor came to her, taking the locket in Mia's hand in her own. "He will come around," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Or he won't. It doesn't matter. What matters is us now." With a newfound purpose, Elelonena pulled out her phone. She made a call, her voice a calm, commanding force that Mia now understood could move mountains. "This is Elelonena Vance. I need Dr. Alistair Finch. I don't care what his schedule is. My private jet is on the tarmac at SFO. I want him in this city by morning, ready to see a patient." "Yes, cost is no object. Make it happen." She hung up and turned to Mia, her eyes soft with a century of unshed tears. "Your mother will have the best care. You will have a home, a real home. You will never have to work 2 jobs again unless you choose to. You can go to school, travel, anything. The world is yours now, Amelia." Mia could only shake her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elelonena said gently. She looked down at the locket, tracing the starburst with her finger. "Your grandfather made this," she whispered, giving Mia the final piece of her story. "His name was Thomas Reed. He was a brilliant painter, and he had the kindest soul I have ever known. He would have loved you so fiercely." Elelonena looked over at Sarah, who had drifted into a peaceful sleep. A real family. After a lifetime of loneliness in a palace of gold, Elelonena had finally found her home in a cramped 2-room apartment with a daughter lost to time and a granddaughter she never knew she had. The Van's fortune of stocks and steel was vast, but it was nothing compared to this. This was the real inheritance. This was the inheritance of the heart. In the end, it wasn't Elelonena Vance's billions that healed her broken heart. It was the discovery that the greatest treasure she ever possessed was not something she could buy, but someone she had lost. The story of Eleanor, Mia, and Lily reminds us that family is not defined by wealth or status, but by the unbreakable threads of love that weave through generations, sometimes getting lost, but never truly severed. Mia's simple locket, worthless in a pawn shop, turned out to be priceless, for it held the key to unlocking a 50-year-old secret and reuniting a family torn apart by circumstance. It's a powerful testament to the idea that our true legacy lies in the connections we forge and the love we refuse to forget. If this story of loss and reunion touched your heart, please let us know in the comments below. What would you have done in Mia's position? Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who appreciates a story about the enduring power of family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will move you, inspire you, and remind you of the extraordinary stories hidden within ordinary lives.